Our next question is coming from Michael in Salt Lake City, who has a question about monument projects in southern Utah. Michael, you're on the line.
Oh, thank you very much, Senator Lee. I'm very honored that you would actually take my call. I'm really concerned about the Secretary of Interior's recent statements about expanding monuments and how that may affect the administration's stated goals here about doing something in the Greater Canyonland area, and how that would affect the potash industry and the oil and gas industry in that area.
Okay, great question, Michael. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I too share this concern. It's one of the many things that I worry about due to the fact that 2/3 of our state is owned by the federal government. And because 2/3 of our state is owned by the federal government, we can't tax that land. And as a result of that, our schools suffer, our local governments suffer, and economic development also suffers. Now, not all of these lands, contrary to popular belief, not all of these lands are national parks. In fact, the overwhelming majority of these lands are not. Let's set aside for a minute the idea of national parks, but just the garden variety BLM land that's out there should not just be sitting there in a state, in a condition in which it's completely beyond the reach of and beyond the ability of local residents to access that land. We also should not have in place provisions of law that make it so easy for the president and his administration to simply seize land, to grab it, to create de facto wilderness simply by designating a national monument. You know, it was about 100 years ago, Michael, that Congress passed a law called the Antiquities Act that gives enormous discretion and power to the president to designate a national monument. I personally don't think Congress ever had in mind these massive monument designations that involve many hundreds of thousands of acres of land. But regardless, the time has come for us to change that law to restrict the president's authority. I was very disturbed when Secretary of the Interior, Sally Jewell, recently made those comments suggesting that the president might act at her suggestion with her support to do that. This is one of the reasons why I opposed and voted against Sally Jewell's confirmation as Secretary of the Interior. I interviewed her, and while I found her to be a pleasant person and a well-educated person, I did not find her to be someone who was likely to respect the local interests of states like Utah, where so much of the land is owned and controlled by the federal government. All of this said, we do need a change in law, and I've been working on and I've introduced legislation that would limit the president's authority to simply declare these monuments, and I look forward to continuing to push that legislation along with other legislative reforms to reform our federal land management system.